It is a Wednesday edition of Birds 365, a big Wednesday at that, a walkthrough Wednesday, with no one surprised by that. But we're getting that much closer to the Eagles and the 49ers, which I don't think too many people would argue, John, the two best teams in the NFC. Let me start right there. And there's so much this week about ratings and rankings and how things are looking and the way that you go about winning games and how do you project the team going forward when they're doing certain sorts of stats. Are this the two best teams in football playing on Sunday, Eagles versus 49ers?
I think it's the two best rosters in football. I think, every position isn't the same value, so it gets weighted when you have Patrick Mahomes, for instance. But I think from top to bottom, I would say it's the two best rosters in football. They they both look tremendous. Obviously, the Eagles are only one loss for the second consecutive season, 10-1. San Francisco, when they're hitting on all cylinders, man. And they had a little hiccup when Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel are out, and everybody has injuries, and that's not an excuse. And they should have persevered and been able to win one of them, or at least do something of that nature. But when they're in there, and all their playmakers, and you add them to Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, et cetera, they're tough to deal with. They are very tough to deal with, and they're very deep, and they've only gotten deeper when you bring in a Chase Young, and nobody even talks about Randy Gregory. I mean, they're good, and I've been saying it all week. If the Eagles have been living on the edge, if they play like they did in Kansas City and they play like they did against Buffalo, they're not winning this game. So they do have to tighten some things up.
Fair enough, and I pretty much agree with you across the board, but let me just give you a different slant. As you said, correctly so, the 49ers are 8-3. They hit that lull. They had that 3-game losing streak. After 5 games, the Eagles were 5-0 after 5 games. There's no question in my mind. The 49ers were a better team at 5-0 than the Eagles were at 5-0. They were more impressive than the Eagles were at 5-0, but they did lose 3 games in a row. The Eagles have lost 1. The one we're still trying to figure out how the hell did the Jets beat them, but they did beat them fair and square. If the Eagles, you're stating if the Eagles don't play their A game, and oh, by the way, Eagles did not play their A game against Buffalo. I don't think they played their A game against Kansas City. They won both games, but your definition, my definition of A game, best that they can play, they won those games without playing their A game. What happens if the Niners come in here and don't play their A game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're going to struggle. They've had, if you look at the film, they played probably better, to be honest, in a more consistent fashion than the Eagles. But yeah, it's always possible. It's the NFL, and every team has those hiccups, it seems. The Eagles, the difference between the Eagles and other teams, I would say, is they tend to win even when they have hiccups, and they tend to find a way to win, which should not be underestimated. But if you look at PFF, and San Francisco is the #1 rated team in the NFL, I think they should be when you just add up the categories. But I also I remember we were talking, I was probably at that 5-0 start, and I said, I think you asked me who would win the game, and I said the Eagles, even though San Francisco was playing better, because I think styles make fights, and I think the Eagles are better equipped to handle what San Francisco does well than vice versa, and particularly the 2 offensive lines and the 2 defensive fronts. It might be the best defensive front in football and the second best defensive front. And you can argue who's deeper and who's more talented. And the Eagles got to see if Fletcher Cox is healthy, and there's some injury issues. And Milton Williams hopefully will be back. And then the offensive line, though, it's Trent Williams and a bunch of guys. And if you look at PFF, San Francisco does everything well except pass block. They're not good. And Jalen Carter right up the middle. That is where the Eagles might win this game. We got a lot of time to talk about that, but that's why I think stylistically, I think the Eagles, because of their offensive line, are better equipped to persevere in a game like this.
Then, if you're telling me that the San Francisco offensive line after Trent Williams is certainly gettable, if their overall ranking for pass blocking is nowhere near as good as the Eagles, what does that tell you about the kind of season that Brock Purdy's having? If he's the number one rated in a specific metric, passer rating, the number one rated quarterback in the NFL, and he's doing so behind an offensive line that doesn't really pass block all that well, how good a season is he having?
By the way, they're 28th out of
28th in the NFL in pass blocking.
Yeah, 28th out of 32. So, Nick Sirianni's measure. You never want to be bottom 5 in anything. And that's with Trent Williams, who's one of the greatest left tackles of all time. Now, Brock Purdy's having a tremendous season, and I think Brock Purdy is a tremendous fit for this team. Now, people get upset in this scheme. People get upset about when you call people game managers or scheme quarterbacks or whatever. I don't know why, because that's the scheme he's playing in. So that's all that matters. Now, if he were on the Chicago Bears, he wouldn't be very good because they basically won one of their rare games on Monday night because Justin Fields can make a play.
Let me interrupt you for just a second. Let me ask you a question. How good would Jalen Hurts be on the Chicago Bears right now?
Well, the Bears are a bad team, but Jalen Hurts would win more games with the Bears than Brock Purdy was because you have to do things on your own. You have to make plays on your own to lift them to win certain games, as Justin Fields was able to do. He's that type of quarterback as well. Not nearly as good as Jalen Hurts, but he can do some things on his own. There's nothing wrong with it. He's got a great play schemer. He's got the best weapons in football. And he distributes the ball. He's a point guard. He's Mo Cheeks. That's what he is for old Sixers fans. And he's doing a tremendous job. And Mo Cheeks eventually made the Hall of Fame because he was a great point guard. Is he Isaiah Thomas, who can go win the game by himself as a point guard, or Steph Curry? No. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not an insult. If we want to go the PFF route and just look at quarterbacks and how they rate quarterbacks, I'll give you that. Because Brock's, I don't think he's top 10. He might be top 10 now. But I'll check it out real quick. I mean, he's in a great system. He processes quickly, and that's what you need.
So do you consider San Francisco's system that much better than the Eagles system?
It's not about being better. It's about utilizing what you have. It's about utilizing what you have. The Eagles system, when Nick Sirianni got here, what I like about Nick Sirianni, he didn't want to run this system when he got here. He was just fresh off Phillip Rivers and Andrew Luck and guys like that. He wanted to run 11 personnel and throw the football all over the lot and have the explosive passing offense. And he got here and he started, and you remember the start, 2-5. And he said, you know what? Jalen Hurts was passing the ball. He was throwing it 45 times, and people were like, well, that's what he wanted to do. But he quickly realized there's too much on his plate. Let's scale back to what he does well, and people get insulted by that. Everybody gets upset about everything, and they go heavy RPO, and they turn into the offense they are now, which is phenomenal. And that's what you should do as a coach. You should maximize the talent you have and limit the deficiencies as much as possible. So in Kyle's case, he's got a quarterback who processes well. And Brock Purdy deserves a lot of credit because everybody wins with Kyle Shanahan, but nobody wins to his degree. So I would say all the time, you and I have butted heads with Jimmy Garoppolo. He stinks. He stinks, and he's a completely made up Kyle Shanahan quarterback. But if you look at all the games they won with Jimmy Garoppolo, they're winning more with Brock Purdy. So he deserves credit. He runs it even better than the average person, but he processes quickly. He gets the football out of his hands. He gets the football in the hands of Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. And again, it's Mo Cheeks dishing it out to Julius Erving or Moses Malone or Bobby Jones. And they're the stars, and he's the point guard. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. I think it can, because I think Purdy is more than quote unquote a game manager. You and I have a different percentage breakout of how much credit Shanahan and his system should be getting and how much credit Purdy should be getting. You're very heavy edge toward the system being the reason why they're successful. I think Purdy deserves a little bit more credit for it. I'm not downplaying how important the system is, but I just don't have as much of a percentage sitting in the coach's lap as I do in the quarterback. That's we just see it slightly differently, and I think that the Eagles should be prepared for both the system and the quarterback this week, because they're coming in playing dynamite football. They're hotter than the Eagles are right now into the coming into the game. And yeah, J-Mac, I was surprised. I checked it this morning before I came on Vegas Insider. The line has actually gone up. It was favored 2.5 San Francisco. It's now up to 3 in as many places as it is still 2.5. I thought that the betting public would bring it back down. They set a starting line, and they're pretty good at it. They don't want to move the line. When you set a line, you want to get it as close to what you think John Public is going to bet on it, because if you move it, then you open up the possibility for people middling it. And right there at 2 is a number that does come up in the National Football League. They're actually moving it towards San Francisco from 2.5 to 3. Are they statistically that much better than the Eagles, that in their house, in the Philadelphia Eagles' house, the 49ers are righteously a 3-point favorite?
Are they righteously a 3-point favorite? I mean, that's, as you mentioned, that kind of dibbies by the general public, and obviously they want to get people to go in a certain direction. So they tend to be very good at what they do. I think it's an opportunity to make money. I think this is a big Lane Johnson week. Now, Lane, as I mentioned, I don't think people look into the styles. I think they look at San Francisco and how well they're playing, and they're playing well. And they're saying, well, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? How do we deal with that? Offensively, defensively, and the way the Eagles are playing defensively, it looks like a tough matchup with all the playmakers San Francisco has, and they're healthy. It looks like a very tough matchup. But I always say it, Jody. I've said it 100 times. I'll say it 101, probably 1,000,001. If you can't block people, you can't play offense. It doesn't matter who you have. And if they can't block the Eagles' front, it's what happened last year. You can't play. And it was disastrous in the fact they lost 2 quarterbacks. Now, I don't expect that to happen again. But bottom line is they couldn't block them. They couldn't block the front. What's changed? Josh Sweat, it might be a tough afternoon for Josh Sweat, because Trent Williams is one of the greatest of all time. So typically that's a very good player, and that might shift, and you might not get as much from Josh Sweat. But everybody else has got a big advantage, and I mean everybody else on that Eagles defensive front. And it's got to be a Reddick game and a Carter game and a Jordan Davis, and hopefully Fletcher Cox is healthy. And you go to the other side and you say Nick Bosa, Defensive Player of the Year. Well, he was Defensive Player of the Year last year, and he went up against Lane Johnson, and Lane Johnson's Lane Johnson. That's not to say he's not going to get beat on a particular play. That's not going to say he's going to beat him 100% of the time. But Nick Bosa is not going to have a typical Nick Bosa game. Javon Hargrave, we know how good Javon Hargrave is from his time in Philadelphia, especially as a pass rusher. Well, he's got to deal with Jason Kelce and Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens as an improving player. The Eagles are capable. Doesn't mean they can't have a bad game, but they're capable of blocking that defensive front. I don't think the 49ers offensive line, with the exception of Trent Williams, I always have to put that in there, can block the Eagles' defensive front. That's why I like the matchup from a style perspective. Styles make fights.
Is Buffalo's offensive line that much better than San Francisco's across the board? Because Bills moved the ball pretty damn effectively against the Eagles last week.
Well, also, you know, Josh Allen is one of those guys. Now, Josh Allen is, look, he's very reckless at times, and I've criticized him for that. But God, is he talented? I mean, he is ridiculously talented. And when he's got his A game, he's difficult to deal with, to say the least. And I know people are down on Buffalo and all that kind of stuff, and they're having a bad year, and it's certainly disappointing. And I'm not a big Sean McDermott guy anymore. I think he's, you know, the shelf life is probably over there, but you know, he's really difficult to deal with. I'll just say that. But and I'll look it up. Pass blocking. Buffalo's got a better offensive line than San Francisco. Again, with the exception of Trent Williams. I don't know how much
Trent Williams including it. We're not taking him out of it, but him with the 4 guys with him.
All right, Buffalo. So Buffalo's number 7 in the NFL pass blocking. San Francisco's number 28. Now, that's a pretty significant difference.
That's pretty damn different. A big difference. Because Buffalo did a pretty good job of keeping guys off Josh Allen's back. And like you said, you got to give Allen credit because he'll make plays with his leg. That truly scared me. I was on the air on CBS for the second half of that game, and I kept saying, what scares me here is Josh Allen with his legs. More than Josh Allen with his arm, that he's going to pull the ball down and make a big play with his legs. Purdy is. And I watch enough San Francisco games that I did check the stats. He's not afraid to pull it down and take off. He's not Josh Allen. He's not Jalen Hurts. He's not Lamar Jackson. I'm not trying. He's not Justin Fields. I'm not putting him into that kind of category. But he's also not Kirk Cousins, who's a statue. He's going to be in the pocket. He's never leaving. If he's going anywhere, he's sliding side to side. He's going to throw the ball away. Purdy will pull it down and make a play with his legs every once in a while. He's not someone that you can just forget about and have the linebackers and the safeties turn their back on him. He'll take off and he'll make 20 on you. So it's something the Eagles have to be careful with this week. All right, do me a favor. During the break, you were going to look it up for me. PFF ranking, quarterback rankings. Where does Purdy come in? You can give that to me when we come back because we're going to take our first time out of the show. Mike Gill's got a T-shirt on. The question is, what does it say? Yeah, you thought I was going somewhere. Yeah, please keep the T-shirt on, Mike. We don't want you taking the T-shirt off, but we do want to know what it says. Our buddy from down the shore, Mike Gill, up next here on Birds 365.